Thursday, December 10th, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So they are coming after our wealth next. They've already trampled on our freedoms and liberties during this 2020 crisis. Now the globalists, or if you want to call them communists, because that's what they are, one world order types. They want to bring back feudalism. Sometimes they call it neo-feudalism. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. There's been a wealth tax commission report on how to pay for this so-called pandemic of 2020, where they've basically shut everything down. They've basically ruined the economy. They've ruined thousands of small businesses. They've kept the big monopolies alive and thriving. And yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And you might say, well, might as well not have any wealth. At least they can't take it away from you. That's true. But if you've worked all your life, or you're just starting out and you've been lucky enough to save some wealth, to build some wealth, I'm going to give you my opinion of how to try to protect yourself. And I don't know everything, but I just know a few things from experience. Before I start, though, I'm going to recommend a book that I've recommended many times in the past. The talk about wealth confiscation, a one-off, which will probably become a regular wealth tax here in the UK. Some people might say, oh, that's just to test the waters. They're never going to tax our houses, our primary residences. Well, but after 2020, we need to think again and really be conscious that this could happen and act in a way that we do not expose ourselves to the wealth plundering of the state. You need to start using your imagination, I think. And I can't really think for everyone because everyone is in a different circumstance. But first to the book. The book is called The Law by Frederic Bastiat, the classic blueprint for a just society. Here it is. You can find a free PDF online, or you can try to buy the hard copy. It's less than 80 pages. So what's this about, this book? Let's just go through it here quickly. And it says, The Law, Frederic Bastiat. It is impossible to introduce into society a greater change and a greater evil than this, the conversion of the law into an instrument of plunder. France of 1850 was in political turmoil in the aftermath of the Revolution of 1848. The tide of socialism was sweeping the nation, and there's no difference between socialism, communism, and even the crony capitalism that we have. I saw Rand Paul give an interview, I think it was to Newsmax, and they were talking about this package, stimulus package. And Rand Paul actually was talking about the fact that there's no money in DC. They're going to have to borrow everything. And he said this is going to end in tears because the debt is just going to keep going up. And the people interviewing him said, how come no one else is talking about this? And Rand Paul said, well, there's only 4 or 5 real conservatives in the Senate, and one of them is me. So that's out of 100. And he said, in the House of Representatives, there's only about 20 that think like me. So if people think that being a Republican or a Democrat matters, no, these people are all after your hard-earned wealth, because wealth is really when you're able to accumulate some of your productive capacity and save it. When you're careful, when you create value for society, that's what wealth is. Of course, there is the crony capitalism wealth these days, which is acquired through political bribery, through favoritism that we've seen on Wall Street. And unfortunately, the real creators of wealth, the people who have worked hard and have done it honestly, they get bundled together with the crony capitalism or with the crony capitalists. So what does it say here about Frederic Bastiat? Well, it says, one man stood alone against the tide. The precocious son of a merchant, Frederic Bastiat devoured the writings of free trade economists such as Adam Smith and Jean-Baptiste Say. Rejecting the popular notions of his day, Bastia began to speak and write against ideas he believed were undermining natural harmonies of interest among men. First as an orator and essayist, later as a member of the Legislative Assembly, he became known for withering logic and devastating wit. He also became isolated politically. The struggle between left and right was for power and plunder. So there you go, left and right, it doesn't matter. Yet Bastia believed that the only purpose of government was to guarantee individual rights and freedom. That was all. The state, he declared in perhaps his most memorable epigram, is that great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. So there you go. That's what we're doing these days. Of course, there is a solution to all the government debt, all the spending they've done this year and have done for over 100 years. The solution, of course, is to cut the size of government to the bone. And like Mr. Bastia said, the focus of government should only be to guarantee individual rights and freedom. Because once you guarantee the rights and freedom of the individual, you guarantee the rights and freedom of the whole society, right? Because society is not something real. It's made up of individuals. But unfortunately, and it might seem a useless struggle or a useless ideal, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And we're going to get more and more plunder, more and more big government. But we need to keep at it because the word government means to govern your mind. But if you're able to keep your mind, govern your own mind, I think you are in a good direction, going in a good direction, even though all around you, government is trying to trample on your mind, on your freedom and liberty, on your wealth, right? So yesterday we had this wealth tax commission. So this report came out yesterday. I didn't read it yet. I think I will read it. We'll have to see. But the Telegraph reported on it. And it says, raid property and pensions to raise 260 billion, commission tells government. So I read through this yesterday, and this morning I had a look through who these people are, the Wealth Tax Commission. And it's very interesting who they are, really. The founders of the Wealth Tax Commission, well, the London School of Economics, LSE, the University of Warwick, Kate, and the London School of Economics International Inequalities Institute. And you've got also the UKRI, which is the Economic Social Research Council. And if you look at the Wealth Tax Commission, if you Google it, you get the top stories and you get some Twitter feeds or some tweets, and you get Thomas Piketty, who's a communist for all intents and purposes, a French economist, whose only solution to the problem inequality is more confiscation of wealth, because he doesn't understand that the reason why there's so much wealth inequality is that the powers that be have been stealing or robbing the general public with their inflation, with their funny money, for over a century, and they've been basically helping those who can fight the inflation, but he doesn't look at the underlying problems, right? He's the opposite, of course, of Frederic Bastiat, who was a Frenchman as well, like Thomas Piketty. Unfortunately, I don't think you ever hear Thomas Piketty speak about Frederic Bastiat. I would even speculate that he doesn't even know who the guy is. So Thomas Piketty said, Wealth Tax Commission proposes to create a one-off post-COVID wealth tax in the UK, together with more progressive inheritance tax, council tax, and capital gain tax. The next step to fight tax evasion is an annual wealth tax. This should be done right away. So this wealth tax commission is saying that it's going to be a one-off, but that's what they said about, well, similar to what they said after the Napoleonic Wars when they introduced the income tax in the UK. They said it was just going to be for the very wealthy and was going to be temporary to pay for the Napoleonic Wars. But here we are, 200 years later, and we're still paying an income tax, and everyone almost now pays an income tax. You don't have to be very wealthy to pay it. I wanted to look who's behind this wealth tax commission, right? And as I said, the UKRI, that's a government institution. As you can see here, UK Research Innovation is a non-departmental public body of the government of the United Kingdom. So that's a government institution. LSE, I'll go into the Fabian Society Wikipedia page. And keep in mind that Tony Blair is a member of the Fabian Society. The Fabians, one of their symbols is a turtle. And they want to go very slowly to mold society into like a socialist one world order kind of place. It says the Fabian Society is a British socialist organization whose purpose is to advocate the principles of democratic socialism via gradualist and reformist effort in democracies rather than by revolutionary overthrow. So they want to make everyone worship the communist state, right? But they want to do it gradually, like boiling the frog, so to speak, without the frog realizing it's going to be boiled to death. So this is the interesting part here about also Fabianism and the London School of Economics. It says the latest edition of the Dictionary of National Biography includes 174 Fabians. 4 Fabians, Beatrice and Sidney Webb, Graham Wallas, and George Bernard Shaw founded the London School of Economics with the money left to the Fabian Society by Henry Hutchinson. So there you go. The London School of Economics was founded by the Fabian Society, by members of the Fabian Society, with the money that was left by this guy, Henry Hutchinson. And a lot of the central bankers, even Paul Volcker, he went to the London School of Economics. You might say, why are you going through all this? Because I think it's important for us to know who's behind these institutions. And sometimes we just read things, oh, the Wealth Tax Commission, but we need to know who's behind it. We need to know that they're coming after your wealth. And let's go through the article here, what the Telegraph, how they've reviewed this commission report. It says family homes and pension pots would be clobbered by a proposed 260 billion one-off wealth levy to pay for the crisis this year. Don't want to use that word too much. In what would amount to one of the biggest tax grabs of all time. Frederic Bastiat would be rolling in his grave, right? All British residents with personal wealth of more than £500,000 would pay a one-time 1% tax spread over 5 years under proposals from Wealth Tax Commission, an influential group of think tanks and academics. It would hit close to 1/5 of the adult population, almost 10 million. Critics derided the proposal, which would be a huge blow to asset-rich, cash-poor families who would struggle to raise funds to cover payments. More than 500,000 people would have to sell their homes to afford the tax bill unless a system for deferring payments was put in place, the report admitted. The tax would be levied on homes, and here's the important part: homes, savings, investments, minus mortgages and other debts, raising $52 billion every year for 5 years, 10 times the annual inheritance tax take. So this is what I wanted to talk about. This is why I've always said that it's important to try to be outside the system. And yes, they might come after your gold and silver, but I think it's much more private. It's much harder for them to come after things that are small and that you can kind of keep in a safe place, if you know what I mean. But when all your wealth is in the system, it's very easy for them to go after it because they have access to that system. Believe me, in this day and age, you might say, well, but my brokerage account or my investments and my pension, they're protected. I have my privacy, but I don't think so. Look what's happened this year. After what's happened this year, we cannot really count on that. The fact that they're arresting people for driving across borders like Wales and Scotland. They're arresting people for having friends over or going to a party, arresting people for not wearing something that they don't want to wear. Do you think they're going to care about your privacy? I don't think so. Married couples would be able to split their assets, but would still face taxation on any assets in excess of $1 million threshold. So there you go. That's another thing that you might want to think about if you are, for all intents and purposes, married. You need to think about doing it legally because that would help, right? You would save quite a bit if you are near that threshold. If you have got, let's say, $1 million in assets, but you and your partner are not legally married, you would both face that tax separately, actually. But if you do get married legally, you wouldn't. So they go through here how the wealth tax would work, how much the 1% levy would raise over 3 thresholds, and how many would pay. And the other thing people would think about doing is maybe leaving the country, going somewhere else. But it's not so easy for everyone to do that, especially with extended family. You can't just leave the country. And I think if they do this here, you're not going to have many places to escape to. In France, they did this some years ago, but other countries hadn't done. So it was easy for the very wealthy French to escape this. But I think it's going to be harder. So what else do they say? The Telegraph, the proposal comes as Chancellor Rishi Sunak attempts to salvage the economy from its biggest contraction for 300 years and plug Britain's spiraling budget deficit, which is hit to forecast 400 billion, which is like 25% of GDP, which is crazy budget deficit. It would represent the biggest one-off raid on wealth in British history, dwarfing both Tony Blair's 5.2 billion windfall tax on utility companies in 1997 and Margaret Thatcher's 400 million levy on the banks in 1981. Other world governments have only ever restored one-off emergency taxes of this kind in the aftermath of seismic events like the financial crisis and the Second World War. Well, events, of course, that have been engineered by the same people that are behind what's going on this year. This 260 billion wealth grab would be the same as raising VAT or VAT by 6% or the basic rate of income tax by 9%. The report was made up of contributions from think tanks, including the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Resolution Foundation, Institute for Government, and the OECD tax experts and policymakers, including a former head of HMRC, that's the Inland Revenue, the tax man, were also involved. Its authors had previously taken part in official tax reviews and worked with HMRC and HM Treasury. It does look like the communists are coming. Mr. McCarthy was right. He was really a visionary, right? McCarthy. So how do we protect ourselves now? My view on that, well, try to stay outside the system as much as possible. And I know it's not easy. One thing that many people don't talk too much about, because it's not only going to be the state that's going to be coming after your wealth. It's going to be desperate people. And how do I know that? Well, because growing up in Brazil in the 60s, 70s, and early to mid 80s, I witnessed kind of really economic collapse, a lot of inflation. And fortunately for me, my dad actually did well in that environment, in his business. So he survived and thrived, as Lynette Zhang would say. But one thing my dad always told me, you need to be low key. And I always said, why? What do you mean? And he said, well, you shouldn't really splurge or be flashy. You need to be careful with that as well, I would say. That's one of the most important things, being low key, because if you're flashing your wealth around, not only government will come after you, but other people. So I think that's good advice as well. What else? Yeah, using your imagination. And that's for you to decide. As I said earlier in the video, everyone is in a different circumstance. What about going to another country? Well, I don't think it's going to be very different in other countries. Switzerland or other countries, Singapore, people talk about. But those are really, really out of the range of people. A lot of people that have some wealth. It's very expensive. You need to think about that. Sometimes the grass is greener, really, where you are, where you're familiar with the instruments of oppression of the state. You're better able to fight them if you know how they work, right? You go to a foreign country that you think is free, and you're going to be able to protect yourself. And then you find out that there's a loophole or something. So that's what I would say. Yes, it is kind of depressing, but you can't let it get you down. The hope is that they do not succeed in these plans, but I think we need to keep in mind that they do have this stuff in mind, this wealth tax, and it says that it would be a one-off, but believe me, once they pass this wealth tax, if they do, it's not going to be a one-off, and you can bet that they're probably going to lower as well the threshold going forward. I think even in the US, when you had the income tax come in 1913, it was only the very wealthy that paid it. But and also the income tax here after the Napoleonic Wars. So let's quickly look at the markets. So it's just gone past 9:30 a.m. London. Yes, gold broke back below that support that I said 1848, 1850 was going to be support. And it broke through that level. But I think this is just a correction. We had gone up almost in a straight line from around 1760 to 1872. So this is normal. And do you really want to give up your physical gold and silver and put it back in the system now that you've heard about what's going on? I don't think so. Personally, I don't think that's a good idea. So right now, gold is at 1831, down $8.50, 0.5%. Silver as well is down about 0.5%, 23.84. The Dow is up 85. Dow futures 30,115. S&P 500 is up 0.25%. NASDAQ 100 futures unchanged. The FTSE is up 1/3%. So the dollar is stronger versus the pound. It's all in the back of this Brexit saga, so to speak. I mean, from what I've read, it looks like the EU wants to have its cake and eat it. They're saying, yeah, you can leave the EU, but you're going to have to play by our rules, which doesn't make sense to me. But I think it's all distractions as well, because if the EU doesn't come after your wealth, the government, the UK government will. That's what you need to remember. So the pound is down 0.75% this morning at 133.08. And the euro, though, is higher versus the dollar. It's up 0.2% at 121.02. Dollar's up versus the yen this morning, up 0.25% at 104.50. It's unchanged versus the yuan at 6.53. WTI crude is up 0.75% at $46. And the 10-year yield is at 0.93. That's down 1 basis point. So pretty steady, the bond market. What about the fiscal package in the US? Well, as Rand Paul said, they're all socialists, they're all communists in the Senate and Congress. They're going to get it through. That's the only thing they know how to do, to spend your wealth, your money that they don't have. It will go through the $1 trillion, and there's more to come as well, I would say. So hold on to your fiat currency hats because they're not going to be worth much, and they're going to be flying off your head very soon. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Parler, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.